When I browsed social media, what I found was that there were two things that people were really looking for. They wanted to find out how attractive they were and how they could become more attractive. At this time, the GPT Vision API had just come out. I figured that I can just take an image of my face, send it into ChatGPT, and get this analysis that I'm looking for.
But who built it?
I built it.
Where did the coding experience come from?
So when I first ideated on RizGPT, I had a little bit of background with like Python, but no software experience. So ChatGPT essentially built it for me. ChatGPT was my personal tutor. Umax, same thing, run it back. ChatGPT did about 95% of the code for RizGPT, maybe around 90% for Umax.
Nice.
And so I'm starting to build this thing and I'm like, okay, I know what strategies work on social media for distribution, but what if I partner with an influencer? So I brought on Sam Zia. Sam Zia, one of the most popping looks maxers, massive audience, connections in the industry. I brought on him as well as my older brother to help with the engineering side of things. And mind you, the entire time that I'm building this thing, I'm sleeping on my friend's couch and then my older brother's couch. I spent Thanksgiving alone with some sliced turkey. Just coding. And I think that simultaneously this month was the most difficult, but also the most transformative time in my life.
Why do you say that?
It was difficult because, like I said, my family situation wasn't great. Parents weren't doing well financially. I'm sleeping on friend's brother's couch. And, I kind of felt lost. I just split from my previous co-founders. And, there wasn't a clear trajectory of what the rest of my life would look like. This sort of strategy had worked with RizGPT.
Right.
There was no guarantee that it would work with Umax. Yeah, and I think that kind of brings us to the launch.
What went into that launch?
So as I said, I'd brought on Sam Zia and my older brother.
And Sam, at this point, I remember this is around the time we had started talking. You sent me his TikTok. You were like, I just partnered with this guy. He's going to distribute for me. And he had 200K. Now I'm seeing podcast clips of him on Instagram and YouTube, and it has a lot of engagement.
Yeah, working with Sam has been unbelievable. He's absolutely blown up. He's been an amazing business partner. So when it comes to launch, it starts off with a video of his. And the video does pretty well. 100,000 views, we get a few thousand downloads, and we're steadily tracking up. I think in the first month, we did about 100,000 in revenue. I get into HF0 and I move to San Francisco.
And HF0 is what for audience
HF0
context?
is a startup accelerator. They provide a small safe note check and then you go live in this house for 3 months.
How many people?
I think about 20 people lived in the house. So I get to San Francisco and I've got this big vision of what Umax is going to become. This big male self-improvement community with a number of different applications. But the priority right now is just Umax.
Right.
And a couple weeks into HF0, so middle of January, this copycat comes. And they weren't just some other copycat that, took everything that we did and then are trying to optimize for the App Store, steal a few downloads. They copied everything. All of the marketing that we were doing, all of the exact outputs that we had, the sort of metrics that we're looking for in an individual, like their jawline score overall, what have you. And they become a threat. They surpassed us in the App Store. And so I'm like, fuck it. We need to go big now. I had kind of delayed trying to go big. I wanted to continue to improve the retention, improve the application as a whole. And within the course of 4 days, I deployed over $200,000 on influencer partnerships, which was more than all of the money that we had made up until this point. It was a massive gamble. But then within the course of the next 3 days, we exploded. 100,000 downloads, 90,000 downloads, 80,000 downloads, 40,000 revenue, 35, 40. And that popped us up to over $500,000 in MRR. And that was crazy. That was from 150 MRR to 500 overnight, just like that.
And so there's two things that are interesting to me within that. The first one is when you were starting to roll out influencer promos initially, you were trying not to go big. And one thing I've seen with consumer, especially consumer social, is that you want to be careful about how many people see your product before it's ready. From a consumer's perspective, the first time they see an app, that is the only thing that will live in their head. Even if the app is completely different a month later, if it has the same name and it looks the same, they're not going to try it if they didn't have a first good experience. Was that the same reason that you weren't trying to launch?
Yeah, so I think it's particularly important with consumer social, though elements do apply within these consumer utility apps, right? The kind of single player apps that I've been building. The way that I look at it is we didn't want to burn through the entire forest before we had optimized the app for retention, for LTV, for value add to the consumer. But then this crossroads came and I'm like, okay, well, if we don't do it now, then this competitor, they don't seem to care. They just want to beat us with whatever it takes. They're okay with not optimizing for the user experience. They just want to copy and beat us. And to me, that was unacceptable. I figured it was better to burn through the forest and then pursue this long-term vision in the future rather than to allow us to be beat in the short term.
Did you end up winning?
We did. So when they came on the scene, they popped off. I'm not going to lie. They got to the same number of downloads as us. What took us a month and a half, they did it in 2 weeks. But then from there on out, I think that we've 4x their downloads, we're 4x their revenue, and we've kind of become the name in the space.